So to do a successful Seder, you have to figure out how you're going to present the different parts so that the children there are engaged by it. Now, if the grandparents are bored to death, that's irrelevant. Just let's put things in perspective.
The parents are bored to death.
What?
The parents are bored to death.
That could be, all right. But the idea is teaching the children and engaging the children in this process. And figuring out those Wortlach, let us say, those lessons that they will find engaging, and do, as I said, the other things that you have to do. Like I said, I always had chocolate-covered raisins and chocolate-covered cherries and this and that, and depending on how good their questions were and so on. And I mean, my kids hated asking the Manishtan after they were 6 years old, especially once we learned the Mishnah and the Gemara about it's only for stupid kids to ask Manishtan. The Mishnah says, "Im ein das beven as aviv melamdo manishtana." If the kid doesn't have enough brains to figure out that we've changed the order from the normal in the Seder to ask a question, then the father has to teach him manishtana. And my kids, when they learned the Mishnah, said, "Well, of course we're smart enough to ask questions. We're not so dumb." And so they would always ask questions, and the guests, and then we would skip the Manishta, we'd go into the Seder, and the guests would like freak out. No, this is actually what it's supposed to be like. And when Yoni was like 3 years old in Gan, in Israel, they learn everything about the Seder. So the Seder was Thursday night, and he went through the Seder perfectly. And, he knew all the songs and everything else and so on. And when Leil Shabbos comes, and I'm about to make hamotzi over matzah, he goes, "Abba, eifo hachalot?" And
like, what happened?
That's what's supposed to happen at the Seder.
An extension of the first of the Manishtana.
Right, no, exactly. But I'm saying, because we teach our children in advance, and in fact the Seder goes against it, right? Bavor ze lo amarti ella b'shashi yesh matzu mara menachim lefnecha. Bavor ze, I'm only supposed to start teaching it when the matzah and maror and the Zman of the Mikdash and the Pesach are here, right? So it's a surprise for them. What's going on? And by the way, if you have candies that you're giving the kids, hopefully, I like and my kids, because that's all they ever had, like them, the dark chocolate without so much sugar in it, covered fruits, or nuts, or we had all sorts of stuff. They like those things, and they're not pure candy. There's some nutritional value for them, and you can have other things as well. For adults, you can have, whatever it is.
We don't really need.
Some parents do. Some grandparents. There are all sorts of.
So for the good grandparents, we get shots of Louis XIV cognac.
There might be a problem with that because that's made out of wine.
The mom always says something else. He said not to have cognac for whatever. There was another reason.
That's why you have to be good.
I would make sure my parents ate before they come to the Seder, so that they weren't starving. Come full, okay? Otherwise they fetch.
That's what I'm saying. After Kiddush, between the first and second cup of wine, there's no prohibition in snacking.
Right.
And people can do it.
It's good. Otherwise they fetch. That's it.
There is or maybe it was, I don't know whether it exists anymore, but in Yiddish, people would say that Klal Yisrael doesn't have a Seder. There's no order to Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael is this. But we do have Leil HaSeder. And as soon as we start Leil HaSeder, we say Manishtana Halayla Hazeh. Why is this night different when there is a Seder versus there not being a Seder? And Drukman said that there's a very deep message in this Pitkam Amami, as you would say in Aramaic. This common saying that Klal Yisrael really doesn't have a Seder. We're Mi'al HaSeder. We are above the normal way that things work in the world. If you look through history, you see all sorts of empires that come and go, people that existed that don't exist anymore, right? And if you would look at the natural things that what you would expect to be the natural result out of the historical events that surrounded Klal Yisrael, you wouldn't expect them to exist anymore, right? However, the fact that they do is showing that there's something different, and on that fact that Klal Yisrael is above the Seder, the question comes manish to them. What's different between these people? And the answer is HaKadosh Baruch Hu matzilim miyadam. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves us from their hands. And we usually aren't even aware of all of the things that are going around. Rav Kook had a very interesting way of looking at how the Seder fits in. I mean, Rav Kook had an interesting way of looking at everything, but how the Seder fits in to the process of redemption. And he wrote Nora Teshuva, Ha'geula nimshechet hi v'holeches. The Geula goes on and flows. Gulat Mitzrayim u'geula ha'atid ha'shlema. The redemption from Egypt and the future redemption, complete redemption, hipula achas, she'ena posakes. It is one ongoing action that is not interrupted. It's a process that starts with redemption from Egypt and ends with the final redemption. Pula hayad chazaka v'zoro netuya, the act of the strong hand and the outstretched arm, asher hechela b'Mitzrayim, that began in Egypt, which we talk about in the Haggadah, he po'eles es pu'ulosecha b'chol misibos. It does its work in all situations. Moshe ve'Eliyahu, Moshe Rabbeinu and Eliyahu Navi, go'olim hem legeula achas. They are redeemers for one redemption. Hamatchil v'hagomer. It begins and it ends. Haposeach ve'ahochosem. It opens and it seals. Hem yachad memalim es hachativa. Together, they complete the bundle. V'ruach Yisrael makshiva hu es kol hatnuot shel pu'ulos ha'geula. And the spirit of Israel pays attention to the sound of the movement of the action of redemption. Hacholeches mikola misibos, that is going on in all circumstances, ad milei tzmichas keren hayeshua b'melo v'tova, until it is complete, the sprouting of the horn of salvation in its full goodness. All right? We have, interestingly enough, when we talk about the redemption from Egypt, right? We don't have a single mention in the Haggadah of Moshe Rabbeinu.
That's one illusion.
No, but direct saying of
Right.
Moshe, there's not a
Total
single,
concept, that's
right?
Yeah.
I mean about Moshe Avdov. That's it.
Yeah, there's nothing about him being a redeemer there. And we sort of don't have anything about Eliyahu either, right? They are the active characters, but in the Haggadah we concentrate on the true active character, let me say, on God, right? Yeah. So,
God takes pains to say that. Anihu lo acher.
right.
Anihu lo shliach, anihu lo-
Absolutely. It is, we recognize here it's God. It's sort of like the Megillas Hamelech, right?
Mhm.
Where you have Hamelech written out so that at the beginning of every Amud, according to some Minhagim, so that you can see God's action even where he is not mentioned. By the way, it's interesting, in Megillas Shir Hashirim, also there's no Shem Hashem, right? There are two Megillas that don't have, two books of the Bible that don't have any mention of God. Rav Drukman had interesting interpretations, like he had interesting interpretations, everything on the Simanei HaSeder. All right? The Day Shurchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, and so on. I am not going to try and go through all of them because that would take way too long. I want to just touch on a few of them, and even in very, very short way. Normally, the pasuk says "Sur meira ve'aseh tov," right? First, you turn away from evil, and then you do good. So, you would think first you have to become tahor, and then you can become kadosh, right? Because becoming tahor is turning away from tuma, is turning away from impurity, and becoming kadosh is leaving profanity. I don't mean profanity is there's no good word for it.
Mundane.
Chol is
Mundane.
normal thing. Yeah, I guess so. It's not. So, but we do kadesh or chatz. We don't, or chatz you would think should go firm, like the Yekis do. They wash before Kiddush, right? The Ramah says you're supposed to wash before Kiddush because you have to be tahor to be able to become kadosh. Whereas in the Seder we do it kadesh or chatz because where Klal Yisrael was in Egypt, we had to become separated and kadosh to be able to leave, and only after that could we start to remove the tumah. All right.
That's why the Ma'am Loez, he said over and over again, he's quoting other things, but he said that's why it stresses that Hashem came down because he had to, because like if he sent an angel, wouldn't differentiated between us. So it's what he,
Yes.
that's what he says.
Karpas is Adama, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all sorts of different things are used depending upon the customs, right? But no matter what it is, it's something that either is a root or it grows right on the ground. It's never from a tree. It's never even from a tall bush, like a tomato, where they're held off the ground. It would not be used. And the reason is, it's again representing what Klal Yisrael was when we were trodden over as slaves in Egypt. Right? Because at this point in the Seder, we haven't begun to get to any part of redemption yet. The slaves are trodden. And we have this idea of Mikime Me'afar Dal, right? At the beginning of Hallel. You raised me up from the dirt. You're on the ground, you're in the dirt, people walk over you. Right? That's natural. Karpas is illustrating that point of Klal Yisrael's existence.
Never thought of that before.
In the dirt, okay.
Drukman was very original. There are reasons why certain people become gedolim.
Was it also like symbolic of like we're lowly, like spiritually? In
We
Mitzrayim?
had all sorts of problems in Egypt.
Right, so that was also another thing that we were on a low level.
Yachatz, we have half a matzah. And there is a very, very interesting midrash. First, it reminds us of Kriyas Yamsuf. The Yamsuf is broken, So the matzah is broken, right? We go through the two
trap.
parts of the ocean. But there is something else. The Midrash compares the matzah to the hidden part of the matzah, which is the larger part, and the smaller part is exposed. Right? The larger part of the broken matzah. So
The smaller part's exposed.
the smaller part of the afikomen is exposed. The larger part is hidden.
Yeah,
I got it.
So we have different things that can be understood about this. The first one is that just like the hidden part, we only meet at the end of the Seder. So too, the great revelation of the Shekhinah, which will be greater than it ever was, is only at the end of Gullus. The second thing that we can learn from this, that we see certain miracles now, but they are less than the miracles that we don't see. Whatever miracles we perceive, there are more miracles than that going on that we do not perceive. All right? I'm going to skip Magid. No, I just... There's
It's
only
funny 'cause we were
so
talking about
much that we can conceivably do in a short period of time. In terms of motzi matzah, which go together, if you are making, before modern times, and we treat the wheat before we grind it so that it starts the fermentation process today. But before that, right, the difference between matzah and chametz, right, is chametz has a lot of air in it. It's all haughty, so to speak, right? You have to start as a matzah because the chametz is very self-centered. A haughty person is always thinking about me and I and so on. They always come first, right? However, to start the process of redemption, you have to understand who you are, which is small. The Yetzias Mitzrayim is going to Har Sinai at Shavuos, and Shavuos is the only time where the carbon sibor that's chametz,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is the shtei alechem offered on Shavuos.
And also dvash, right? Because the fruits are
Well,
sweet.
yeah, but that's a completely different issue. But we go from here, being at the point of having to understand ourselves, to being able to develop our potential. But we have to understand who we are in order to develop into what we should be. There is, in terms of Mar and Korech, I know I'm going relatively fast, but
It's good, it keeps us going.
You're afraid that we're
Fall
hungry?
asleep.
no, but I'd like to get through at least half of the Simanim in a reasonable time. So there's a midrash that says, Shlosha hema nifla'u mimeni. Three things are wondrous to me. Ela Pesach matzah umar. This is the carbon Pesach, the matzah and the mar. Va'arba'a lo yadatim. And four I do not know. Elu arba minim shebelulav. These are the four species in the lulav. That's the midrash. All right? And the midrash Chazal, the most famous midrash Chazal about the arba minim is that they represent different types of Jews. Right?
Yeah.
There is a tzaddik in there, the esrog. There is a rasha, right, who has no mitzvah. And there are two that are Beinoni, if you think about it, right? They either have mitzvahs or they have learning, right? But they're not complete. They're lacking. They're middle of the road normal people.
Why is the Rasha what did you say,
Rava, because it has no smell and no taste.
So it has no mitzvahs and it has no Torah.
smells important.
So how is it possible, right? And in Leil HaSeder, the things are the Karban Pesach, which represents tzaddikim, the matzah, which is beinonim, because it has some ways of slavery and some ways of freedom, and the Rishaim is the mar,
What was the tzaddik? The
Karban Pesach.
Korban Pesach.
Pesach, matzah, mar,
Got it.
right? So you have the same types of issues, representative symbols, let us say, with both Pesach and Sukkot. And both of them, of course, start on the 15th. And we learn Xer Shava, just like there is a mitzvah to eat on the first night of Pesach matzah, there's a mitzvah to eat in the Sukkah on the first night, right? And there are all sorts of chumras if it rains and this and that. And so on, what is possible to do. So how is it possible to join together, the Midrash is saying, these different elements, right? Because normally Rishaim and Tzaddikim don't get along too well together. And if you're,
Are we assuming that I'm talking in Haggadah text, that the Chacham is the same as the Tzaddik?
yes.
Okay.
And there are, if you look in the various Safrit of the Tanaim and Amoraim, you'll find such things explicitly.
It's really interesting.
So the Chassam Sofer says, how is it possible to put these people together? It takes a Hillel. Because Hillel had infinite patience. Right?
If you're a tzaddik, you would think you have infinite patience, right?
Yeah, but many tzaddikim simply can't relate to other people. I know with Moreover or Drukman on a Shabbos meal, if you don't have Torah to say, you simply do not speak. Most people can't deal with that. They want to,
When it converse.
right. My chavrusa, Simcha Weinberg, when he first got married, he and his wife decided they would never allow Lashon Hara to spoke at their Shabbos table, or if they were someplace else, they'd, stop, this is Lashon Hara, we can't say it. Within a month, no one would come to their house for Shabbos, and no one would invite them over for Shabbos. So I'm just saying, it takes a certain madrega to relate with them. There are special people that can do it, but that's a special type of tzaddik. And the Chassam Sofer says this was Hillel. Remember, there's this famous Gemara with Hillel in Shabbos, right? No, Hillel.
Hillel and Shammai.
No.
Different.
No. So someone makes a bet, 400 zuzim, about $400,000 bet, that he can make Hillel lose his temper. All right? And so he waits until Hillel is in the shower Erev Shabbos, and he starts walking around and says, Mikan Hillel, who's this big shot Hillel? Where's this big shot Hillel? And so Hillel gets out of the shower, dries himself, wraps himself, comes out, and says, yes, he says, I have a question. He says, ask, my son. He goes, why do the Africans have such big feet? And Hillel goes, they live in the land of swamps, and the big feet help them not sink into the swamps. Right? And so the guy goes away. He waits until Hillel's singing in the shower again. And he starts shouting out, Mikan Hillel, Mikan Hillel. So Hillel gets out of the shower again, dries himself off, puts on a robe, comes out and says, "You have a question?" Yeah, I have a question. What's your question? Why do the Babylonians have squinty eyes? He goes, because they live among the blowing sand. And so they're squinting all the time, so the sand won't get in their eyes. Goes away. And he waits until Hillel's singing in the shower again. Mikan Hillel, whole thing. He gets out of the shower, puts on his robe, comes out. And Hillel is known, of course, as Hillel Habavli, right? Who's from Babylon. And the guy goes, I have a question. Shal b'ni shal, ask my son, ask. He says, why do the Babylonians have misshapen heads? And he goes, because their midwives aren't experts. And the guy goes, I have many questions. And he says, so he tightens his rope, sits down, says, ask. And he says, are you the Hillel whose name goes from one end of the world to another? He goes, yes. And he goes, Lo yirbu kamocha b'Yisrael. There shouldn't be a lot of people like you in Klal Yisrael. He goes like, my hi, what's going on? Why not? And he goes, because you have caused me to lose 400 zuzim. And Hillel goes, you should lose 400 zuzim and another 400 zuzim, and Hillel should not lose his temper. By the way, this is in juxtaposition to an Agada about Pesach with Hillel in the 6th parak of Pesachim, at the very beginning. So before Hillel and Shammai were heads of the Sanhedrin, the Bnei B'Seira were the heads of the Sanhedrin. And Pesach came out Motzi Shabbos, and they didn't know whether slaughtering the Korban Pesach sets aside Shabbos or not. There was a long period of time when the Tzedukim controlled the temple. So they didn't have control over it for that period of time. So what was done wasn't necessarily right as to what should be done. And they didn't know. And so they said, does anyone know? And people said, yeah, there's one person here who was served the Gedolei Hador of the previous generation, Shemaiah v'Avtalyon, the Hillel Habavli Shemo. He's Hillel the Babylonian. He will know whether Pesach sets aside Shabbos or not. So they call him and he teaches them. He has a drasha for it, and they said, this is your own drasha, we have a response, but if you accepted it, then, if you received this as a Masorah, we will accept it. So as I received this Masorah, and he's teaching all day, and they're asking him shaylas. And finally he says, what caused me, a Babylonian, to be appointed above you all? You know how Israelis, that's where the source of Limud Torah is. Here it's shown. Who caused the Babylonian to be appointed the head of the Sanhedrin over all of you? He goes, Atzlus shebechem, that you were all lazy. V'lo shemashtem et shnei gedolei Hador, Shemaiah v'Avtalyon. And you didn't serve the two gedolei Hador, Shemaiah v'Avtalyon. And then they asked him shayla, and he forgot it because he got upset. And that's not good for your memory. So that is the background story, right, to this. By the way, there's a conclusion to it. The shayla was, if someone forgot to bring their knife to shecht their korban, Pesach, before Shabbos to the Mikdash, what are they supposed to do? Because the temple was a different reshus than Yerushalayim. And he said, Im lo nevim hem b'nei nevim hem. If they're not a Navi that I can tell you in advance what they should do, they will know what to do on the spot. They're the children of Nevim. And the next day he saw someone whose korban was a sheep, a goat, he put it between the horns, the knife between the horns, and the goat would carry the knife up. If it was a sheep, he would put the knife through the fleece, and the fleece would carry it up. And he said, this is what I received. Now I remember. Anyway, it's there's so much in these ideas that we have. And so the Chassam Sofer says, only someone like Hillel was able to make the kricha, was able to eat the matzah mar and Pesach together, put everyone together because of his incredible patience. No matter what it was, who it was, and how it was, he was able to bring them together. And remember, their matzah was soft, not hard like ours. So when it talks about wrapping it up, you know.
The Temani matzah, right?
Yeah. Not only Tamanim, Sfardim. Most Sfardim have this matzah. They've started using the regular machine matzah. Many Tamanim do also because it's simply so much easier and cheaper to have that than, baking this stuff by hand. That's much, much harder to deal with. Anyway, we have then Barech. I'm skipping, remember? And in Barech, we have Shir HaMalos before, right? Birkas Hamazon. And it says, B'shuv Hashem es Shivat Zion hayinu kecholmim. When Hashem returned us, we were like sleepers. And the Rishonim ask, what does it mean we're like sleepers? And there's several Peshatim, which we don't have time to go into them all now. And Rav Drukman said, as an educator, I want to add another one of what it means, kecholmim, like sleeping. You sometimes have a Talmid in Shir who he's there, but he has absolutely no idea what's going on in Shir because he's daydreaming, right? He's in another place entirely. We live in a situation today where if you bother to read through the Navi, everything the Nevi'im talked about Geula is happening. But so many people
Are asleep.
are asleep at the wheel, right? And they're incapable of seeing what's happening right in front of their eyes. There is one person who's very popular. People love reading him now. And I read one sentence in one of his Sfarim. I saw it, it's become popular, so I opened one up in a bookstore to see what it is. One sentence, and he said, at the beginning of the state, people thought there was something to it, but everyone today can see that there's absolutely nothing. Like I'm saying, you have no idea what you're talking about. You haven't read Navi. I'm not interested. I don't care how popular you are. You missed the boat. Not interested. Then we have Hallel, and we say, Anachnu chayvim lahodos. We have to give thanks. Rashi says that with Dam Tzvardea and Kinim, because Moshe Rabbeinu had been treated well by the river, so to speak, and the sand, therefore he could not cause these plagues that came from them, right? Because he had to be thankful to it. And it is when we recognize, as you go through the Magid part, what Hashem has done for us, right? We realize that we have to thank him, right? This is a critical thing, right? Just like we have to thank God for all the things that he did for us, getting us out of Egypt, we also have to thank him for all the wonderful things that he's done for us today. For almost all of us, we do not remember a time before there was a state of Israel. That generation is gone, almost. There are a few people left. But for people that lived through the Holocaust and see the turnaround in the world in such a short time, and see how it changed how Jews were viewed in the world, not only in Israel, but other places, right? We have to realize that this is something that we have to thank God for as well. And only through that process of thanking God for the things that He is doing for us now is it possible to aim for the Geula Shlema. Nirtza. We have in the Piyutim, in Artza, and afterwards, Karev Yom Asher Hu Lo Yom V'Lo Laila. Right? The day is coming close that will be not a day and not night. And this is referring to a pasuk in Zechariah. Vaya Yom Echad Hu Yodei El Hashem. There is one day that is known to Hashem. Hashem knows when it's going to be. We don't. Lo Yom V'Lo Laila. It's not day and it's not light. V'hayaleis Erev Yeh Or. And at the end of the day, the time of the evening, there will be light. And so the Mefarshim explain that the Navi is not talking about a day of 24 hours.
It's a period of time.
Exactly. It's a period of time. And as Rashi says, that we do not have the sorrows of Galus, we don't completely have the pain of exile, and we don't have the Ravacha of Geula, we don't have the freedom, complete freedom of redemption, right? Shnehem mishamshim be'eruvia. Both of them are serving together. And that we can now see that we're in this time period. Right? Anyone that doesn't see that is, they're daydreaming, that's for sure. When compared to the stories I heard from my grandparents about what it was like in Tsarist Russia or communist Russia to today, it's complete and total night and day, and the difference between how Jews can live in the world. And we have to understand and give thanks for these things and be happy that of what we have achieved. You can't only look at what we have not yet achieved. If you look at what we haven't yet achieved, then we should be very upset about the Yetzias Mitzrayim, because it could have led to the final redemption if we hadn't blown it, but we blew it, so it didn't. So why should we be happy for that? Because it didn't work, right?
It's true. Yeah.
You know, so we have to be thankful for that. We have to be thankful for the things that we have now.